Welcome to TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. The purpose of this podcast is to provide you with a candid conversation about our energy needs, our energy security, and your energy future. Texas oil and natural gas have made our nation the world's energy leader, constantly innovating and investing to fuel the economy, protect the environment, and power the world. This industry is fast-paced, high-tech, and essential to improving modern life. And we're here to talk about it. You're listening to TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. Welcome back to another episode of TXOGA Talks. I'm Todd Staples with the Texas Oil and Gas Association. Always glad to be joined by Shana Joyce, Vice President of Government Regulatory Affairs.
Always good to be here.
Shana, is all your Christmas shopping done?
Oof, no.
Okay. Still a couple of days here.
Yes.
It's tight. We're so delighted today to be joined by the numbers guy at TXOGA, our Chief Economist, Dean Foreman. I really appreciate Dean's perspective in digging into the data and being able to describe that in ways that are beneficial to our listeners.
Yeah.
So today I really wanted us to think about winter ready. Texas Oil and Gas Association has a winter ready campaign to describe the role of natural gas, how natural gas operators, how natural gas midstream companies prepare their assets for those that need natural gas during the winter. Natural gas operators do not put anything on our electricity grid, but we supply a big portion of the gas that goes on to turning into electricity and putting electricity on the grid. So I thought it's very important today as we approach the winter season, we're all enjoying a little bit cooler weather, that I wanted us to take a dive into our ERCOT grid and look at the available megawatts on the grid, how our grid is how it's sourced in terms of power supplies that puts electricity on the grid, because most Texans remember Winter Storm Uri, and not in a very fond way.
Yeah.
I mean, Winter Storm Uri happened in 2021. It was disastrous. We had a polar vortex that immobilized our state and cost people's lives. It was tragic. Fortunately, the Texas legislature, led by Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Phelan, all rallied and made substantial changes to the way ERCOT is operated. And my opinion is, and Shana, you work on this on a daily basis for TXOGA and for our member companies, my opinion is that if another Winter Storm Uri hit, we wouldn't have the same outcome.
Agreed.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think there are so many actions that have taken place during that session and beyond to ensure that equipment is weatherized, whether that be natural gas generators or, on our side, oil and gas operators, if they're deemed that critical to ensure that they're moving that natural gas to the generators. So we've all taken a look and have taken a step back to kind of assess. And that's been across the fields. That's transmission service providers, oil and gas operators, generators. Everyone has kind of taken a step back. And I would say in addition to that, we also have more communication. We have these tools that we're realizing that are very useful when it comes to these winter events.
You hit on two things that I really want to dig in on. One is communication and one is critical load, critical infrastructure. When it comes to communications, the legislature created the Texas Electricity Reliability Council. We have TURC, Dean, we have NERC, we have FERC. We've got all these acronyms.
A lot of IRCs.
IRCs. We've got a lot of IRCs here. But the good news is, when you look at the assessment of really what occurred in Winter Storm Uri, one of the biggest failures was communications. And now we know that the Railroad Commission, ERCOT, PUC, generators, natural gas providers, natural gas transporters are all on calls pre-storm, during the storm, and post-storm in order to make certain that we have the maximum amount of reliability.
And I'll actually add, we have TCQ on those calls as well. They ensure that we are maintaining water quality levels for folks, because that was an issue.
Huge issue when your water systems don't work, right?
And we also have TXOGA on those calls, because one of the things that we have talked about as TXOGA is the oil and gas field is vast, and it's not like just down the street.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So to ensure in personnel safety, we have to make sure that those roads are ready for folks to be able to go to those that equipment and facilities to ensure that it's up and running.
And the good news, all of this is coordinated by people who are experts in emergency management. That's the Texas Division of Emergency Management. And so our leadership in the state brought these very capable people together and charged them to never let this happen again. And I will say systems do fail. Mechanical systems do fail, whether it's your dishwasher at home
That's right.
or your refrigerator, which I've experienced both in this last little bit. We know that things don't always work as intended, and there's going to be issues, but we have a really robust system to deal with that. Now, one of the big issues during Winter Storm Uri that we discovered is that natural gas field facilities were not eligible to be designated as critical infrastructure.
That's right.
Critical infrastructure, and why this is important is critical infrastructure is that type of infrastructure that's necessary for our electrical system to operate and for the fuel systems to operate. There were provisions that excluded those facilities from being designated. Now, when you go through a limitation situation when it comes to not having enough available electricity to meet all the needs, you go through load shedding events.
Yes.
And load shedding is if you're not designated as critical infrastructure, like a nursing home, a hospital, things of this nature, a water system at a city, then the transmission service providers, the wires people who deliver electricity to your home, can shed those assets that are not designated as critical load. So we had some natural gas facilities that were losing power at a time when everyone was needing much more natural gas than they ever do. A lot of that has been cured. Now, interestingly, there's been, the blame game goes around anytime there's a disaster. Certainly Winter Storm Uri was a disaster. ERCOT looked at what were the root causes for generator outages during Winter Storm Uri, Shana? And you looked at that data as well. And let's share with our listeners today, what were the identified causes for generation outages during this critical time frame?
And for the folks listening, we'll make sure that we link this on our website, TXOGA.org/TXOGA Talks. And you can see that graphic there. We'll also link in our show notes. But this is from ERCOT, which is our grid, operator. And weather-related outages were 53%. We also had equipment issues that were 14%. You had some transmission line losses, that was 3%. And then you had existing outages. There were just some operators. Now, let's also think back to that storm. Most of our state was covered in ice and snow. That is not a normal occurrence. Right. And so it is fair to say that there is going to be some types of equipment that just have outages that couldn't operate. Fuel limitations, I want to make sure this is loud and clear, was only 12%, even though it seemed that amongst the conversations that they tried to push that as most of the causes.
Yeah, a lot of people were thinking that the lack of natural gas, and this is what Dr. Foreman is going to be able to really elaborate on, is the availability of gas, how much gas we have, where does the gas that we produce in Texas go, those types of things. But it's important for all of us to realize that natural fuel limitations were only 12% according to ERCOT. NERC did a study. What does NERC stand for, Dean?
National Electricity Reliability Council.
National Electricity Reliability Council. They also did a study, and when you dig through their data, they really kind of back up the numbers that ERCOT had that demonstrated what these outages were. So I just think that's an important framework when we establish what we want to talk about today and the natural gas system and the role that our industry is doing to be winter ready. Because if before we just get right into a couple of more facts that I think our listeners would want to know about, is when we look at the ERCOT system today, how many megawatts are available at any one given time? What is our total capacity? What might that be?
Roughly 100 gigs.
So about 100 gigs or
100,000
megawatts. is equivalent to 100 gigs. And so that's if everything's working 100% functioning, right? And we know that our system is made up of dispatchable power sources. And Dean, what are examples of dispatchable power sources?
Anything we call thermal and dispatchable, things that are under human control to be sent to consumers and through the system. So nuclear, coal, natural gas, and some biomass.
Okay, those are sources, Shana, that can be called upon at 24/7 and should be available if the systems are functioning properly. We also are made up, though, of intermittent sources. And what are intermittent sources?
That would be our wind and our solar that's on our system, which we have a lot of in Texas. We're
the
pretty
leader.
blessed with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're the leader. And we utilize those resources.
Yes.
But the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day and the wind doesn't always blow. And so you have to have a mixture of those. And so if we have extreme conditions like we did in Uri, you have limitations on those systems when it's cloudy during the day.
Sure.
That's why dispatchable sources are so important. Well, good. And what is the most predominant source of power in our system today, Dean?
For sure, it's natural gas most of the time.
So natural gas, and that's why we're focusing on natural gas today, folks.
And that's why it's important to have these conversations and to ensure that communication is happening so that all of the people amongst the supply chain are prepared when the winter weather comes.
And that's why our campaign is called Winter Ready, is because we all need to do our part. We're in this together, all Texans alike, and we want to be prepared, and we want all systems to be operating at the maximum level that they can be. And natural gas is doing that. I'm really excited about the role that natural gas plays, what it means for our economy, and we're fortunate to have a significant volume of natural gas storage infrastructure, of transmission capacity, no matter what the weather happens to be.
So, Dean, let's talk a little bit about how much natural gas does Texas produce on a daily basis, and then how much do we use? And I think there was a good chart that you usually have that you've put together where you kind of showcase where all that natural gas goes.
So
that's a lot of questions throughout you, sorry, but they're all important.
We've continued this year to have record amounts of production and marketed production that, before there's any processing or anything else that takes natural gas liquids out of it. We've averaged just under 33 billion cubic feet per day so far this year. It's never gone less than about 31 billion cubic feet per day. And for electricity, we're talking about the amount of natural gas that's consumed by the electricity sector is averaged about 5.7 billion cubic feet per day. So roughly 3 to 4 times more is getting produced than we need for electricity. It can flex, right, depending upon seasons, from 4 to a little over 8. But we have an awful lot of natural gas, and it's ample and abundant for electricity generation.
So if people are needing natural gas for electrical generation, there's 3 to 4 times the amount than they would possibly need. And if they needed more, our marketplace is making that available, is what you're saying.
Real time, it's happening. We've historically had the most liquid or fluid trading hubs and natural gas system in America. It's really enabled the system to grow, and that's why we've been able to accommodate so much power growth to go with our economic and demographic growth in the state.
And I will say that's done on an intrastate basis, right? That's done without federal oversight or regulation. These are Texas entrepreneurs that are risking capital and are producing this product and then moving this product so that we do have an abundance.
That's right.
It's a great point because the intrastate pipeline system that connects the producing centers with the demand centers in the state and storage in the state, that's private capital that's been invested. It's a system that's unique from the interstate pipeline system, and it's why Texas has been able to respond so nimbly.
And I think it's similar to you at home. If you know a storm's coming, what we do at our house, we get extra water on it and make sure we have milk and bread and the basics and those kinds of things. Users of natural gas are taking those same types of precautions. And study after study has demonstrated that during Winter Storm Uri, generators that had firm contracts for supply, storage, and transmission received the product they need, even in spite of the difficulties that everyone else was experiencing when we had load shed and those types of things.
Yeah. And, Dean, I want to go back to a key word that you just said, storage. So can you talk to us a little bit about storage, about what Texas, I think we're kind of blessed because we have those storage capabilities in our state. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Let's talk about first the volume of it.
Okay.
Recently, per Energy Information Administration estimates, Texas has 878 billion cubic feet of storage.
Let's give that number again.
878 billion cubic feet.
We produce how much?
33, roughly.
And then we have how much in storage?
Well, we have to the month about 720 billion cubic feet actually in storage out of capacity of 878. Okay. So it's about, in Texas, 82% full.
Wow. And
if we're comparing to nationwide, which is about 85% full, you can store up to 9.3 trillion cubic feet. So multiply by.
Yeah.
But so Texas is actually a relatively small portion of the whole nationwide storage system. Okay. But it's important because it's grown, it's increased, and its deliverability. And by that, I mean how much gas can go out of storage to consumers. So here's an example.
Okay.
You're living in Houston, winter storm comes. The natural gas that you need and the power that you need can be served either from pipelines coming directly from production centers or out of the storage that happens to be on the Gulf Coast and relatively nearby.
So we have different pockets of storage throughout the state, which is also helpful.
Most of it's on the Gulf Coast, but yes, it is across the state.
Okay.
And that enables a redundancy and a resiliency across the system. And as long as it's designated as critical load and it's not getting turned off when we go through these storm conditions, the system is operated really effectively for many, many years.
Well, you mentioned the fact that our volume of storage capacity has grown, and that's been in response to demand and the market working and companies providing that and other companies paying for that and securing it. Having the capacity is one thing, being able to withdraw that capacity and then move that capacity where it needs to go is another.
Yes.
So you mentioned that a little bit, but elaborate on that some more, if you will, Dr. Foreman.
So the root of this, by the way, is that the material composition of pipelines has improved over time. This is technological improvement that when I look around, I don't see people really talking about this, but storage since the 1990s, since 1993 specifically, has increased some 17%. But the volume of gas that's being pulled out and delivered to consumers is up between 50 and 70%, depending upon which year you look at. The maximum deliverability, the maximum pull out of storage usually comes each January. So if we take last January 2022, these are 50 to 70% differences versus what they were in the 90s. And that difference of, again, 17% increase in storage, that difference is the fact that you've got higher compression on these pipelines. So back in the 1990s, you would have, a typical compression in pounds per square inch of 500 to 700 feet PSI. It's basically doubled now in terms of the standards, and in fact goes up to 1,800 PSI on the higher end. I think the highest that you had back in the 90s was like 1,000 PSI. So the capacity of the system, if I double the compression, I effectively, by ideal gas law, going back to engineering 101, you get about 40% more throughput in the pipeline. And this is just fundamental physics, but it's why if we compress these molecules of gas down, the system's more robust, it can move. In the same pipeline capacity, it can move that much more gas.
Well, for our listeners, I think the points that we really wanted to emphasize here today is that not only did the administrative and legislative changes occur, but physical changes occurred since Winter Storm Uri. And Dr. Foreman has just addressed those. Increased storage capacity, increased withdrawal rates so that could be withdrawn at a more rapid pace during times of emergency demand. And then the compression on the pipelines means you're moving more volumes through the system and even at a faster rate. So that means you'd be able to respond even in a greater basis. And look, ERCOT's not unique in this. PJM, other independent system operators around the country are grappling with these issues, and a lot of those are more regulated markets rather than an unregulated market like we have here in Texas. All important things to make our lives better and to improve the lives of Texans.
how do Texans benefit from that abundance of natural gas?
Well, first, from an economic value chain perspective, you're adding value to something that's local production, right? So it's coming from West Texas or the Eagleford, but in Texas, and then it's being transformed with value added coming all the way through the system. On top of this, the fact that the system's increasingly resilient, this redundancy, it really does increase the efficacy of manufacturing and business here. We're exporting gas on top of this at a record pace, by the way.
Yeah.
And even if our consumption's been high with economic growth, demographic growth, and power growth, hence exports record highs, we still have this abundance that's giving us, if we go from July through recent months and adjust for price inflation, we have the lowest natural gas prices here ever. I mean, since gas was deregulated in the 1990s, going back to 1993 again. So this is really important. That's how consumers are benefiting from it. They're also, when we get to winter storms, they've got a confidence now in the system for deliverability and safety, warmth through the winter. But their business, their livelihood is also intact because of the ability to deliver through the system.
Now, Dean, you mentioned that natural gas prices were lower. In fact, I've watched a good bit this year. They've been negative prices in the Permian Basin because of lack of takeaway capacity and because of overproduction in terms of what the system was prepared for. Yet when I renewed my electricity contract through the Power to Choose website, I experienced a whopping increase, and I know a lot of homeowners are really worried about this. Why natural gas prices are lower than ever? I mean, how can consumers protect themselves a little bit in this space? Because obviously, natural gas prices being so low, natural gas prices are not the issue here.
No, they really aren't. And even though we're using a lot of natural gas at times, before we were talking about thermal and dispatchable, right? And even in recent weeks, there are examples almost every recent week period where we will see it'll be 10 o'clock at night, it'll be 6 in the morning, and 90 to, in this case, a few weeks ago, 97 to 8% of the power on ERCOT's grid was coming from thermal dispatchable sources, including 72% from natural gas. So the low prices are there, but a system that can accommodate the most intermittency, and you said it right, when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, and there will always be hours when that happens, then in winter storms that also happens, it makes it so that you have to have the system backstopped by thermal and dispatchable sources that are within ERCOT's control. We've talked in other podcasts about the move toward real-time co-optimization, so being able to coordinate these things in real time, not just on a day-ahead basis. These are the kinds of things that will be real improvements that enable the system to be more resilient and more redundant. But right now, system-wide intermittency raises costs. We're seeing that. And then when we have transmission issues, and through Power to Choose, by the way, it's often confusing for the average consumer to pull this apart, right? There's a rate for energy. There's a certain fraction of your bill that's going to be transmission related. And then there are all kinds of things of the trade-off for locking in for a term versus a fee for termination versus maybe a volume discount, depending upon how you buy it. So I think in terms of consumer transparency, there's progress that can be made in making that demystified a bit. But have no doubt, natural gas is not the culprit for these higher prices.
Well,
it's
Shana,
historical.
Very, very good points for listeners to focus in on. Shana, you work with the PUC quite a bit.
Yes, I do.
Dr. Foreman mentioned a lot of the elements. Do you think the goal of the PUC is to have these products implemented that will help manage these costs? Inflation's hit us all.
Sure.
I mean, it's hit everyone. Everything we buy costs more today because of the last few years. But do you think that we're going to see some improvement as these products are developed and implemented?
I think that's the goal. You know, the PUC right now, they're looking at the ancillary services and how much those are costing. When ERCOT makes decisions, it affects costs and how much it is to run the grid. Real-time co-optimization is something that we've been working on since back in the day. I worked at the commission, so it's taken a long time, but we really think that those efficiencies will help drive those costs down. And I'll also say on the Power to Choose, it's a great website. I know it can be confusing. The PUC does have a hotline that you can call and get more information if you feel confused about which power provider to choose. So I did want to put in a plug in for that.
That's good.
I'm glad you both mentioned that, because when I went online to go to find Power to Choose, there are a lot of non-PUC websites that make you think they're Power to Choose.
Yes.
So if you're a consumer and you're about to renew your contract and you're in the ERCOT system, you need to really make sure you're on the Power to Choose that's supported by ERCOT, by PUC.
Yes.
And you can find that, but you have to read through and make sure that it's not a third party that's trying to direct you to their side.
And we'll ensure that we link the correct Power to Choose on the show notes, because I think that's
Good.
helpful. I've had to help my parents as well in their new home and find that right provider.
You should have worked. You should have gotten my contract.
I
Shannon, done that
also
for
helped
me.
Todd. Don't worry.
I still had to do a lot of work, and that's one thing. Hey, look, we're in an economy where consumers can be king.
Yeah.
But it does require you to investigate, be competitive, look at those prices that are offered, and shop for the best deal for yourself.
That's right.
It's not always easy, but it's better than a command and control system that really doesn't lead to good outcomes. It may get you through some hurdles that you might face on a short-term basis, but long-term, we're in the best country in the world, the best state in the world.
Amen.
And it takes consumer engagement to keep it that way.
That's right. All right, so I think we're going to take a quick break. And Dr. Foreman, thank you always for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You can check out all of Dr. Foreman's awesome graphics and statistics and numbers. I know that's Todd's favorite thing to look at TXOGA.org/economics. So we'll be right back.
Thanks to a partnership between TXOGA and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, now more than ever, it's easy for small businesses to provide affordable group health coverage for their employees through the TXOGA Healthcare Plan. With a TXOGA plan, members can choose the right healthcare plan and benefits for them, priced within their budget, with the physicians and providers they trust. TXOGA's healthcare plan is available to small businesses with between 2 and 50 total employees who are headquartered in Texas, members of TXOGA, and aligned to the Texas oil and natural gas industry. If your organization is not enrolled but looking for coverage, visit bcbstx.com/TXOGA. I'll say that again. Visit bcbstx.com/TXOGA to learn more. Visit today. And welcome back to TXOGA Talks. Shana, we had a great conversation with Dr. Foreman. He always has a very good insight for us. That's what we're focused on here.
That's right.
Energy Meeting Insight.
That's right.
At TXOGA Talks.
That's literally our tagline.
Literally, that's it. So there's a couple of other important elements that I believe that our listeners will want to know about.
Sure.
When we talk about critical load designation, that is one element of it, and it's an important element. But our policymakers and our regulators even took it a step further, and they engaged in a mapping process. So could you just tell us what mapping means real quick?
Sure. So there's a committee. It's made of the PUC and Railroad Commission, and they map those critical infrastructure. The map is protected. It's only viewable if you are on the map. And so that designates where the generators are, where the pipelines are, where the transmission lines are, so that they can all work together in a time of emergency. And so that our state also knows what is that, all those critical loads. And they update that map yearly. And they do have a public website on the PUC that will give you more information about the map, and we'll make sure that we link that there, because I don't want to give you the wrong URL. But the PUC has done a great job of spreading that information and making sure that all of our critical load is mapped.
Yeah, and the importance of that is to, when you map something, you can identify gaps, you can look for, shortcomings that might be, and you can try to address that. So
That's right.
That was a heavy undertaking, and I appreciate the work that they're doing there. Another thing that our listeners will want to know about is that natural gas companies and midstream transportation companies, pipelines, both undertook a weatherization process. So our electric generation facilities who actually put electricity on the grid, they underwent some
They had their
weatherization,
own, yes.
and PUC inspects them.
The ERCOT actually inspects them, and they do yearly inspections in the winter months. And I was actually just talking to Chairman Gleason the other day, and they're starting that process to ensure that they go to those facilities.
And our electric generation providers spend a lot of money doing that and getting it up to speed because they want to be able to perform.
That's right.
And there's an economic incentive to do it, and I'm not complaining about that because prices are generally higher during volatile situations, and so they want to be performing. That means greater reliability to consumers.
Yes,
that's what that results in.
Absolutely,
that's the way our system works. But not only have they done that, but our oil and gas operators have done it as well. They have many of them did this already. Others are being even more robust in their efforts. But some of the weatherization that natural gas producers and providers and transporters engaged in include methanol units, line tracing, insulation, simple things like wind shelters. And these are simple things, but folks, you've got to keep in mind, these assets are very remote. They are unmanned operations. There are compressor stations where switches have to be turned manually sometimes. But our producers engage this effort not only on our assets, but the water disposal wells that take water away when oil and gas is produced. And keep in mind, when oil and natural gas comes to the surface, it's usually very warm. I mean, like 150, 160 degrees sometimes. And so that's not what's freezing. It's when it goes through the other systems and you start separating when that becomes an issue.
And our operators that do have to be weatherized have to turn in a report to the Railroad Commission by December 1st of each year so that your regulatory entity also has a clear view of your assets, so which is great.
And the Railroad Commission is inspecting thousands of these sites to ensure that they're taking the basic steps that are needed to make certain that their assets are winter ready. And a lot of this is described on the TXOGA website, TXOGA.org. And I'm trying to think of the link at the top that it has. Let me look here and I can tell you.
I believe it's TXOGA.org/winter ready.
Okay, you can just go there.
Just go there.
You can just go. Perfect. That's good. If you go to our website, there are tabs at the top, and I think it's under policy and issues.
Yeah.
And you can go down to winter weather prep.
Yes.
So you got a lot of options there. A lot of options. Well, we've provided a whole lot of data, a lot of information. I hope you enjoy this in terms of knowing that Texas is prepared. Texans are doing their part. We have a robust oil and natural gas system that's working around the clock. We have an electrical generation supply system, both of dispatchable power and intermittent resources that are working robustly and doing their part to ensure that Texans at home are going to get the power that they need. But even the best circumstances don't always work.
That's right.
And so there are fluctuations that occur. As a consumer, I get very impatient at times myself.
Who doesn't?
Not in my nature. I'm very, very calm, laid back, never get riled.
You are the most laid back person I have ever
made. You
laugh
laugh really hard at that statement. So I like things to work, but we all need to do our part in making it work. And I'm really proud of the legislature in really digging in, not letting go, addressing this. And there's made a lot of progress. Even so, we can always work to make it better.
That's right. And we've come a long way since Winter Storm Uri. We continue to review the system. Winter's coming up, so we'll put all of our systems in place and go from there.
That's right. We're gonna continue to keep you informed. If you have other issues or ideas you want us to talk about or to do research on, please let us know. Email us. Go to our website, TXOGA.org, and let us know. Follow us on social media.
Yes, we have YouTube, Twitter /X, Instagram, Facebook. We got them all. And we're going to be putting a lot of information on social media throughout the winter. Yeah.
So you'll have that information, new updates all along the way.
That's great. Well, awesome. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.
The views expressed on this podcast are not intended and should not be construed to be the views of any particular TXOGA member or company. The purpose of this podcast is to engage in candid conversations about energy needs, energy security, and the future of energy.